Hi, myself Mopriya. In CorporatesGuide, I am working as a subject matter expert in Spring Boot. So, today's session I will discuss about Spring Boot. Okay. Now, firstly, know about what is Spring Boot. Spring Boot is an open source Java based framework used to create a microservice. It is developed by Pivotal team and is used to build standalone and production ready Spring application. Also, Spring Boot is a project that is built on top of the Spring framework. It provides an easier and faster way to set up, configure and run both simple and web-based application. It is a Spring module that provides the rapid application development feature to the Spring framework used to create a standalone Spring based application that you can just run because it needs minimal Spring configuration. Okay, now you just know about some of the advantages of Spring Boot. It creates standalone Spring application that can be started using Java jar file. Also, it tests web application easily with the help of different embedded HTTP servers such as Tomcat, Jetty, etc. We don't need to deploy WAR files. Also, it provides opinionated starter prompts to simplify our Maven configuration. It provides production ready features such as metrics, health checks, and externalized configuration. There is no requirement for XML configuration. It offers a CLI tool for developing and testing the Spring Boot application. It offers the number of plugins, and finally it also minimizes writing multiple codes, XML configuration and annotation. It increases productivity and reduces development time. Okay, Spring Boot is the combination of Spring framework and embedded servers. Now you know about how did Spring Boot originate. The Spring framework has gained the interest of the Java developers community as a lightweight alternative to EJB. EJB means Enterprise Java Beans integration and become one of the most popular application development frameworks. It consists of a large number of modules providing a range of services, including a component container, ASAP support, security framework, data access framework, web application framework, support classes for testing components and etc. Collecting all the required Spring component together, setting up library dependencies in Gradle or Maven, and then configuring the required Spring beans using XML file, annotations or Java code requires quite an effort within the Spring framework. Spring Boot is already a launchable app. Depending on what Spring Launcher class you extend, it might be a CLI app or a web app. To add more stuff to the app, you just have to add dependencies to the project. Here you can see the architecture of Spring Boot. In Spring Boot, there is no requirement for XML configuration. It uses convention over configuration software design paradigm, which means that it decreases the effort of the developer. The main goal of Spring Boot is to reduce development, unit test and integration test time. Now you see the diagram. I try to demonstrate that every layer of a Spring Boot application is directly communicating with the layer. So here first one is presentation layer. Presentation layer handles the HTTP request, translates the JSON parameter to object and authenticates the request and transfer it to the business layer. Second one is business layer. Business layer handles all the business logic. It consists of service classes and uses service provided by data access layers. It also performs authorization and validation. Third one is persistence layer. Persistence layer contains all the storage logic and translates business objects from and to database rows. Last one is database layer. In the database layer, CRUD operations are performed. CRUD means create, retrieve, update and delete. Spring Boot uses all the modules of Spring like Spring MVC, Spring Data, etc. The architecture of Spring Boot is the same as the architecture of Spring MVC except of one thing, there is no need for DO classes in Spring Boot. Here, data access layer gets created and CRUD operations are performed. The client makes the HTTP request and the request goes to the controller and the controller maps that request and handle it. After that, it calls the service logic if required. In the service layer, all the business logic performs. It performs the logic on the data that is mapped to JPA with model classes. And finally, a response page is returned to the user if no error occurs. Okay, so that's all about Spring Boot.